So yeah, Donald Trump is going to be the president soon enough, and this will have an impact on e-bikes sooner rather than later. After traveling to China myself, talking with component companies, bicycle brands, importers, the effects are not what you might think it would be. And despite Donald Trump's personal history, I'm not expecting red carpet treatment anytime soon. I'm sure a lot of you have heard that Trump is saying that he's going to crank up the dial on the trade war with China, of which the vast majority of bikes and parts come from there, but there's something that we do need to remember. It might be hard to believe, but Donald Trump's policies are, we'll call them inconsistent. Now, I know there's been marketing on making America great and everything, but there's a really big gap between what Donald Trump proposes and what actually happens. I mean, you don't have to look terribly far. You can check out the border wall of his first term. On the same note, the notion of an unprecedented exodus of deporting all illegal immigrants that he's been saying recently, I mean, it's just as untenable, but wouldn't you know it, it's also just as impossible to argue that the Biden administration did a better job at the border. Many people say that Donald Trump's bellowing itself is an effective deterrent. Now, I bring this up intentionally, and yes, I am playing both sides of the political aisle, but I'm trying to make a point that Donald Trump himself is going to be unpredictable. But guess what? Actually, it turns out that Donald Trump has personally invested in bicycles before. Long ago, Trump was the major investor in the American version of the Tour de France, which was very cleverly called the Tour de Trump. Now, as expected, this was only a business and branding venture for the Don, as even when he was promoting the event, he said that he had not ridden a bicycle since he was 7 years old and didn't seem especially embarrassed.
When is the last time that you rode a bicycle?
When I was about 7 or 8 years old was probably about it.
Now, perhaps this is a good thing for his image, because I get the feeling that riding a bicycle would be seen as off-brand for Donald Trump. He spent my entire lifetime and much more gallivanting around in conspicuous consumption, and so the pedestrian move of using a bicycle might be seen as a little bit beneath him. Now, it's actually more than a hunch, because just a couple years ago, Trump himself pledged that he would never, ever ride a bicycle.
I make this pledge to you today, I will never ever ride a bicycle.
There's not too much more to this side of the story, but let's close the chapter by saying that, coming from the executive branch, I really don't expect any favorable treatment. AI-generated garbage is about the closest we're going to get to Donald Trump on an electric bike for now. But getting into the meat of the issue, Donald Trump really does have a lot of his presidential legacy wrapped into the performance of the American economy, particularly the China trade war, which of course directly impacts bicycles. It actually has been going on for a long time, but it finally did work its way into us recently during the Biden administration just this last summer. A 25% tariff on e-bikes, among other things, did go into effect. You can actually check out my full breakdown by clicking on this video here. Now, the short version is that for American companies, it's a godsend. There aren't all that many electric bike companies that build their bikes here in the USA. HPC is one company that comes to mind. Also, there is an electric bike company called the Electric Bike Company. They are one of the larger ones. And also there's Liberty Trike out of Pennsylvania. But the vast majority of USA-built electric bikes are boutique brands that offer something unique or custom. This tariff levels the playing field by these folks by coercing online and even local retailers of cheap imports to go ahead and raise their prices, which has happened in a lot of cases. And that's great news, right? All is well. Kind of. Not exactly. So recently, the Biden administration sought to curb unregulated e-bikes coming in from China that were skirting the tariff. A bunch of them were coming in under an $800 value threshold and therefore exempt from all tariffs. Now, Chinese companies can easily do this because they have instant control over the components and packaging and pretty much all the costs. So at this rate, we're going to see an expansion of that $800 cheap e-bike segment, which I'm going to guess is made with about, I don't know, $200 to $300 worth of parts. But really, don't blink, because we're going to see that quality level pour onto retail platforms under a bunch of phony baloney brand names. Assuming that they are struck down for junk reviews or service over a little time, a new batch of these are just going to come across under a new name and the cycle will repeat itself. In a prior video, I actually covered that Amazon didn't even bother to care about selling dangerous products until they were forced into doing so. So yeah, I really don't expect them to be policing tariff status or anything like that. But getting back to the consumer, most of them cannot discern between an $800 electric bike and a $1,200 electric bike. And that disparity on the pocketbook is very real. They don't know that some $800 bike on Amazon is actually a substantial risk of just being a $200 cash grab that's in disguise. This could turn off a lot of potential lifetime customers forever if they do get that cheap bike, and that's very sad to me. While that doesn't really compete with the USA brands tit for tat, I feel like it drives a price wedge into the minds of a consumer. Are you going to pay $800 for a bike or take the jump into $1,200 bikes because those $1,200 bikes also have to pay a big tariff? In the recent past, I feel like the sweet spot for a quality first e-bike was that $1,200 to $2,000 price range. There's a lot of options from in-store to online, and those open up a world of adventure. So I really have a high interest in seeing that category and seeing it blossom. And I feel like this tariff is going to get in the way of that. On the other hand, it does sound good for American e-bike companies, and even the notion of starting a new e-bike company, now knowing that the high overhead that you have to pay here is somewhat mitigated by the shipping costs and tariffs that balance the overseas imports. But this is assuming that an American e-bike company is a remotely attractive venture for an aspiring businessman. And I hate to break it to you, but it's not. The American electric bike industry is primarily staffed by American enthusiasts and passionate people from top to bottom. The regular non-electric side has had a little more time to mature, but even then, bicycles are really not the first thing that an MBA graduate thinks of after they throw their cap. I mean, shoot, Donald Trump himself did not continue to support the bike race for very long, and eventually it fizzled out entirely. And as a side note, if Trump does get the proposed universal tariff that the entire world has to pay, if that's enacted, then it would also affect bike companies in the USA because they have to get their components from overseas. But I'm not putting a lot of effort into this possibility because bikes would be the least of our worries if that kind of tariff goes through. You don't have to look terribly far to find an example of something like that didn't work out. Sri Lanka, for example, they wanted to be self-sufficient with only fertilizer, and that destroyed their country overnight. All right, I'm kind of veering a little bit, but it is my opinion that the impending increase in tariffs will not create a whole lot of new bicycle brands, bicycle models, or even a lot of bike jobs here in the United States. For the lucky few companies that do benefit from this, I think it's great news and I'm happy for them. But for the average consumer, I really don't see a huge change on the horizon other than the increasing price or lowered quality in one of the most popular segments. And that does kind of hurt for me. Not like monetarily, but like I'm sad for that. I want to know what you guys think. If you're watching this, then there's a good chance that you've been around the e-bike blog a time or two. This channel is still at the point where I can commit to reading every comment for the first while, so go ahead and let her rip. Let me know what your experience tells you. You can check out this video for the Amazon stuff and this one for the China tariffs. I will see you on the later.